Kirk, I have to ask you, in representing Jodi Arias, what do you think, if you had to say the one thing that's hardest as a defense attorney preparing for a major trial like Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow face, what's the hardest thing from your perspective?
You know, it's about keeping your focus on what really matters because, and Jack may disagree, but I look at these grand jury transcript issues, these motion to dismiss, they're kind of a road to nowhere. Yes, attorneys file them, they want to challenge it, but more often than not, if you win, the indictment gets corrected and you're back to where you square one. So my focus is always going to be on the trial and everything involved in the trial. So if I'm Mr. Pryor in this situation, I'm going through those grand jury transcripts, yes, with an eye on flaws in the indictment, but most prominently looking at how it relates to the upcoming motion to sever, because I know that that's going to have the biggest impact at trial. That's going to have the biggest impact on my client's case, because that is the most prominent issue in this case as it stands now.
All right, Jack, from your perspective, what is the hardest part in general, but also in this case? Do you agree or disagree with Kirk?
That's the severance issue, isn't it? I mean, this is the fight that's really going to come here. I've had this happen to me multiple times, murder cases, crime sex cases, very serious assault cases. And what you find is that the prosecution regularly wants to prosecute everybody together and dirty up the room, and everybody feels that. The need is to be able to sever these pieces out, to try your case separately, to be able to say, it was not me. If there are other issues that take place, if there are other people who did bad things, who committed crimes, those aren't your crimes. And that's a very difficult thing to do, especially when you keep them side by side.
And let's talk about the legal grounds why a case might be severed. And from my perspective, it was always whether or not there would be prejudice to one of the defendants by trying them together. And if the answer is yes, then clearly a motion to sever is appropriate. But the cost of having two trials versus one with two defendants is significant. It's a significant cost to the county. So, Kirk, are those the considerations, or is there anything else you think needs to be thought about as to whether or not these two cases will be separated, and that being Lori and Chad?
Well, you correctly pointed out the dichotomy there, or the opposing viewpoints. But I think your analysis in the beginning was right. If someone cannot get a fair trial, then that's it. The trials must be severed. And ultimately, we also have to keep in mind the context here of the death penalty. That death penalty looming out there for both defendants. Can they get a fair trial, and would that affect the sentence they receive when there's all this mudslinging that Jack talked about? And especially now when we talk about Mr. Daybell, right? When Miss Vallow comes out, she's got mental health issues. It's highly likely that she's going to come out and say, I fell under the influence of this cult leader, this man, and he's the one who did it, and he's the bad guy. And that's all going to stick towards him, and as it relates to conviction, but the potential of a death sentence as well. So I think the judge has got to be cognizant of that, especially if the state pursues a death penalty, so they can be separated, so that sentencing is more likely to withhold the scrutiny that federal courts will impose upon it down the road.
Yeah, excellent points. I so enjoyed talking with both of you. I could talk about it all day, but I recognize we have limited time. But you're both going to stay with us, because